I'm really honored tonight to have two other remarkable people in our field. Kathy Ryan from the New York Times, a picture editor, Dina Litovsky, a photographer, former alum, by the way. And we're going to talk about how they work together, or they're going to talk about how they work together, what it is to make a story, make a photograph, make an edit, make a piece for the New York Times, and what it is to be a picture editor, what it is to work for a picture editor, what it is to work as a photographer. I'm going to begin with Kathy. Most of us probably read the New York Times on the internet these days, and I do too, but I do get the Sunday New York Times. And I get it because I need the materiality of the paper, tradition, if nothing else. And the first thing I open is the New York Sunday Times magazine, which I have to read through to get it, but it's heavier. And the first thing I do is I look at who the photographers are who are doing the feature stories. And there's usually a little blurb by Kathy about them. Sometimes I know those people and sometimes I don't. And I'm very happy to learn, in fact, about those I don't know, but also to see people I know very well, and particularly a whole number of our own alumni through the years. Kathy has been at the Times since 1987 in the magazine, and I would say that the New York Times Sunday magazine is the last best place for an editorial photographer. It is a place where ideas are allowed by the photographer. Kathy enjoins with the photographer, has championed many young and emerging photographers, but has also shown many of the greats that we know and people who are becoming great, and lets them find their own mettle within the nature of whatever the assignment is. It's sort of the prize assignment, as far as I'm concerned. It was even in the day I did such things. And Kathy has befriended many of these people, I think Dina as well, and championed them through. She is in her own right an award-winning editor, picture editor. She's gotten Lucy Awards, all the major magazine editorial awards. She has lectured at the Met here. She's been a mentor in this school. And I think she represents the best of a tradition that we need to hold on to. The idea of making a story using the image, the photo image, or the camera image, the lens image, in an expressive way, but still as a document or a tale of something in the real world. With AI, we may lose some of those things, and as you all know, some of you don't know this, we're going to have a discussion about ethics in AI and witness on the 6th, is that right? With Fred Riching, former picture editor of the New York Sunday Times magazine, Brian Palmer, and others, including students from journalism programs around the city. And I think all of you are interested in something about the camera and what it has to say and what it can do and how it can be expressive. And sometimes you give up on the idea that you can be in the real world and do that as well. It's an idea of discovery. So I applaud Kathy, who, by the way, is a photographer in her own right, and whose book Office Romance is a charming look at the New York Times building, her associates, what light is like, what the experience of being in one place and just living there, I suppose, most of her life, and finding new discoveries every day and what it looks like. Now we come to Dina. Born in the Ukraine, educated in psychology, I think, at NYU. And I think that background is important to her vision of the world, because she takes a social psychological look at the people and places that she looks at, sort of a social landscape of people and community, and she's able to adapt quite remarkably to almost any subject matter that she approaches. She's also got a blog and flash, what do you call it?
In the Flash.
Huh?
In the Flash.
In the Flash, right. Blog, she's become a teacher online in many ways. I greatly admire her do's and don'ts, which some of you ought to have. I sent it out to our students. I hope you got it. It's sort of a continuation, a much better one of something I did myself back in the late 70s. There are do's and don'ts, and then you figure a way to break those do's and don'ts. She has worked for all the major magazines. She was one of the PDN's 30 emerging photographers way back when, last year. She just graduated, by the way. At least it seems that way. So, with no further ado, we have a remarkable team to discuss and meander and wander together through this current landscape of real-world witness. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, thank you so much. Should we turn the lights down a little for the projection? Can we?
Great. Oh, thanks.
Completely off.
What?
Completely off. Yeah, I think that's
Perfect. Oh, that's great.
Now we have to follow that introduction.
What?
So now we have to follow that
Now
introduction.
we have to live up to it.
Yes. By the way, should we talk with mics like this? Do you hear us? Yeah? Okay. All right, let's start, I guess, at the beginning.
Yeah, we're going to start in the beginning, and I'll say right up front, I was surprised when we got together to talk about this. I didn't even realize it. Dina's done 30 assignments for us. So I just want to say that, like, the time goes so fast, and you're going to see an incredibly wide range of the kinds of things that she's done. We're just going to sort of talk through them. The first one was this assignment in Hawaii for our Voyages issue that we do every year. And why did we call Dina? We reached out to her because I had been struck seeing her pictures by, there's an intensity to them, a vividness. She just goes in there, and I always felt like she brought a sort of energy to the picture she was making that you're almost more likely to see in black and white sometimes with these incredible compositions, and yet she's doing it all in color. And that there's tremendous just presence, both on the page and on the phone. And we're going to talk about that a lot, going back and forth, because the most challenging part of what I do now is we're on 3 different mediums: the phone, the printed magazine, which we've got down, right, from so many years of doing it, and the desktop. So, Dina, tell us a little bit about this one. Your thoughts, first time going out for the Times Magazine.
Well, I'm going to preface before actually this assignment. So, I started working was 2017, and I think that was 2017, right?
Yep, I think that's right.
And so I've been working in editorial, graduated here in 2010. And so I've been working in editorial for maybe roughly 5 or 6 years, but I worked for everybody at that point except New York Times Magazine. So they never called me, and I was my #1 publication, my like Mount Everest to work with. And I was like, why aren't they calling me? And so this conversation with the
This part I didn't know, but.
Right. So what's interesting about this conversation is, when I work with editors, it's a very usually impersonal relationship. There's an email, I send the pictures. They don't know much about me, I don't know much about them, and they certainly don't know this, what I want, how I thought of the project, what are my fears. So this is it's a rare and incredible experience to tell you the stories. You're going to be some are embarrassing, some are maybe surprising. But I really wanted the magazine to call. And so when I got that first email, I was, I did a little dance. I was very happy. And then it's Hawaii. First assignments are, to me, they're like the most important assignment because it's a break or make assignment. If you don't do well, you don't get hired again. And it's not even not doing well. You have to do such a good job that the magazine just wants you, where have you been? And that's really important, that first assignment. And that first one that I got from you was from Hawaii. And I thought it was like a trap. It's too good to be true. So the assignment was going for a week to go as a tourist and have fun in Hawaii and photograph. And I was like, what's the catch?
What's the catch? but partly what we wanted, the other thing is you commission someone for their point of view, right? And a point of view can be the graphic one, the formal one, the look of the pictures they make in terms of light composition, but it's also attitude. And that was the thing, like, we don't want to do straight up tourism photography. That's not us, right? Of course. It needed to be something that had a little spin, a little bit of like commentary. And it was pretty clear from seeing Dina's work that there was just a kind of commentary on the social scene unfolding. So it seemed like you would have some fun with the tourist and there's always a touch of wit to it. And then when the shoot came in, we were delighted to see this. This picture right here is just fantastic, right? Because you get the colorful little people, almost like little birds traipsing across the lava field. Like I felt like you saw immediately the kind of surreal, just craziness of that scene.
Yeah.
And that's what we had hoped for in the commission. And
And I
then this one having fun with it, right?
That was, I think, the challenge because it was the first assignment. So it usually gets easier when you work with somebody and I kind of know what you want and my vision can be done stronger because I understand your needs as well.
Yeah.
But when you first start, it's very hard to kind of that line. I think every photographer working with magazines, where do I end and the magazine begins? And since I don't photograph before, I was photographing at that point just parties and social events. I wasn't doing travel photography. And I wasn't sure what I'm supposed to do because travel photography, I usually see, I realize it's not what you want, that it's not what I want. Something picturesque, more kind of National Geographic type. That's not really what I do. And I wasn't sure if the humor would come through in a way that works. So I remember I almost didn't send this photo. I'm like, maybe they're not gonna take it well,
It always makes me nervous when a photographer says, I almost didn't send it because it's often the very photo that actually would love, so please always send them. And they're fun and they're beautiful and it just, with this gigantic tortoise or turtle, you could just see that you were having fun with it, and just catching all these great moments.
When I boarded the plane, so I spent a week in Hawaii traveling through the Big Island in Oahu. And when I was on a plane home, I had a fit of panic. I'm like, I had too much fun. I'm coming back from vacation. I must have screwed this up. And I really panicked until I got an email that it was good, but I was like, there's no way I got something good. It felt like I was on vacation versus work. And then like images like this is an image I would take for myself. And again, like since it was the first assignment, like I wasn't sure if it was like too much of me.
No.
And thankfully it wasn't.
No, the whole idea is to give as much of you as possible,
Every photographer wants to hear that.
No, but it's really true because, one other thing with magazines you have to keep in mind is, and our magazine is, just to divert for a second, is sweeping in terms of the subject matter we cover. So one of the luckiest things for me is to be in a place where in the same afternoon I'm dealing with assigning war coverage and a great performers portfolio in LA or some kind of human interest story. We kind of cover the entire range of subject matter. Stories repeat themselves to some degree. They do, but they don't, right? So that you constantly want to change it up. So, okay, this is a lighter subject, tourism, but you want to give it a different look. It needs a little bit of a signature. And Dina always had that vision, like some kind of just picking up on the foibles and oddities of people, but with empathy, humor, wit, a little bit of all of it, And even like, again, we'll talk more about lighting because she early on had figured out a lighting system and a look that's part of the signature. That's crucial. And I feel like that's also a turning point because just over the years, some of the people we work with, the lighting signature, and you have that, also puts you in a category that makes it uniquely yours. Like a lot of people would shoot these scenes with no strobe, but this just added just an extra pop to it that was fun and invigorating.
That's kind of, I use light as a signature, and every photographer, like when you want to work with editorial, I think there's like two issues that we're all facing. One is to find a niche you have to have like specialize in something to work with magazines, right? So when I graduated SVA, I did a project on Take This Photo, and so I was just doing parties, nightlife and parties for 5 years. And I loved it until I got bored of parties. And it's like, I can do other things. Like, I knew I could do other things, but nobody would hire me because I haven't done travel or haven't done portraits. And you're like one of the first directors who started hiring me to do something else. And then the question becomes, okay, so now I'm doing travel, but how do I still make it me? Like, how do I make it like the recognizable style? And I think that's why I carried the flash through, even though I tried to have the same, I guess, mentality about style when I would do different projects. But for example, like this photo, I remember photographing it, and this was like, first of all, it was really fun. I was underneath like a exploding volcano, and the water around me was bubbling. And so if I took the shot without the woman on the right, that's not my shot. That's just like a National Geographic shot. It's beautiful, and I took that shot, and it's beautiful, but that's not my shot. And so by including the women, it was like putting little signatures to kind of see people looking at the spectacle.
Yeah, and it places it in the moment we all live in, right? That somebody in front of that, the overwhelming odds are they'll have their phone out taking a picture.
Yeah.
So you made a document, and 50 years from now, it will represent this moment, you know? And obviously you liked that, again, like critique of this is what tourists do, you know?
Yeah.
Although it's interesting, I like you have her looking at it as she's holding it, at least not,
Yeah, she's
looking through it, yeah.
but I'm glad. I think this was actually what made the magazine, this shot versus the more straightforward shot. So that's when I knew we're like on the same page.
On the
And then-
same page, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
Wanting to again, have an opinion. Like, that's the other thing I always think about that separates the photographers. You have to be opinionated. So something in your pictures, you've got to take a stand on something. And you'll see as we're going through Dina's work, which so many of you, of course, know, there's always, you understand that it's opinionated. She's not just showing you this is what it looks like. She's kind of commenting on what she's seeing in front of her. And that's a crucial part of it.
Yeah, when I try to turn their opinion off, sometimes it just doesn't work. Then it just comes out boring.
One thing I'll back up, though, when you had mentioned that the first 4 or 5 years you did the parties, I do think it's good for students to know there is a strength in having a subject when you first go out to try and get some assignments. That was a smart move because, A, it's something you're passionate about, so you're making great pictures. But it is good if you go out to see photo editors, if you're both making terrific pictures, meaning that formally the composition, everything you're doing is working, and you have a subject matter that connects you to the pictures, that is helpful. So I did want to say that because then you can never lose sight of the fact it's just practical advice, but photo editors are working constantly on deadline. So we have to make a lot of decisions very quickly. So it's just a way of saying, like, maybe a lot of times you would get a job because they're like, oh, those great party pictures. And then you get an assignment because they're thinking, okay, we want someone who can really cover this social scene. So it is good to have something that you're connected with, because unless you're a full-on studio photographer and it's just a series of portraits. But even then, like if you have a subject while you're making that series of portraits. So I just want to say that because I do think over time it helps to have that, and then you move beyond it because hopefully photo editors will see you don't have to be assigned to that subject forever. It's not about what's in your pictures, it's how you see what you're photographing, and they'll get past the fact that was your subject you initially got known for.
Yeah, first you make a reputation, then you have to break it.
Yeah.
That takes
Well
even longer
said.
than making it.
Yeah.
It took me longer to break out of photographing
that's
parties than I spent time photographing parties. And now I miss parties. Like, why is nobody hiring me for parties?
I miss parties.
So I think this was the second. I mean, I'm not going to show the 30 assignments. It's a lot. We picked
No, there won't be 30.
Yeah, don't worry.
There's about maybe 10.
10.
This was so good. It was a story we were doing on youth dance competitions, and we were just blown away by this because look at the composition in that. Look at both the lighting, the composition, the perspective, everything coalesced into a beautiful, muscular, powerhouse kind of photo. Like, just loved it. And then the expressions on their faces and the lighting capturing them, and the way that the flash illuminates it, and then you get the bright red lipstick, which seems just a a little surprising on the young girls. I just everything about it was right. But tell us about your inspiration for this one. You mentioned to me who you were mentally channeling.
So, well, Charles said that I have a psychology from NYU, but I also studied art history. So a lot of my inspiration comes from art, from painting. I try not to imitate painting in style, but I kind of steal ideas here and there. So I looked at, Edgar Degas. Nobody's surprised by that. It's ballerinas. But not just the subject matter. So Degas was actually, he was painting from photographs. So he was very influenced by photographs. He was, for example, cutting off, like if you see his pictures of horses, like Western pictures, he's cutting off like horses and riders like halfway. So he's actually using the painting, like the action is taken outside of the frame. That's a very photographic device versus a painterly device. And so he was doing it because photography was just getting popular. And so I just love the way I love his painting. So I was influenced by painting, influenced by photography. And so a lot of this, like before every assignment, I need to look at something that inspires me. Otherwise, I get brain dead. So I was looking at a lot of Degas. I just picked up a Degas book and just went through his paintings, and I tried to photograph them.
It's such a good practice to get into. And, I believe strongly, and you really have to feed the mind the well. You have to keep replenishing it. Everybody should be developing an ongoing mood board, as it were. Just keeping that file, whether you clip it out or print it out or keep it digitally. I go for the printouts, but obviously I get that people just accumulate stuff. When you see a great painting in a museum and you're visiting, take that a cell phone picture. When you see a movie and there's a scene that you love the look of the green on the wall or whatever it is, the way that the eyes are illuminated, freeze it and screen grab it. I just feel like can't say enough how important that is. And I've now realized that many, and I didn't know this for a long time, because I think sometimes younger photographers start out, sorry, am I like lecturing too much? But they start out thinking, oh, you don't want influences because it'll influence you. But the reality is you want to look all the time. It's the same thing as if you're going to play tennis, you have to practice every day. If you're going to make pictures, you got to be looking all the time at painting, movies, photography, whatever, and just constantly building that sort of interior archive in your mind. Like it's interesting. It makes a difference. There's a saying that I have a brother who's very scientific. Louis Pasteur once said, "Chance favors the prepared mind." So the chance, you increase your chances of making a great picture. And Dina figured this out early by preparing your mind. And anyway, in each case, we're going to talk about, like, it became apparent, like, she's always thinking of something before she heads out. And with some of the photographers we've worked with, they could do a mood board with 20 different things. Sometimes it can be one. And obviously Degas, with the cropping off body parts, it was a terrific inspiration for you. And then it translates into a whole other medium with your lighting and the shadows and the intensity and the modernity of the color. And that's why it's nice to get the influence from painting.
Yeah, I call it steal from other arts. When I say steal, if you steal a little bit from everybody, but not from photography, because then it can get derivative. But music, cinema, painting, I call it stealing little ideas, like micro stealing, and then you kind of put it in your own little tapestry. But that basically every assignment I have to have an inspiration. Yeah. And sometimes it's movies. A lot of times it's David Lynch.
I think there's something coming up that's David Lynch, which was not surprising when I found that out, somehow knowing your work. Okay, so tell us about this one, Mon Fille.
So this was, you commissioned, this was a French tennis player, and you wanted to shot in a studio. Now, what I didn't tell you that I've never photographed in a studio before, and I had no idea how to set up lighting.
You gotta love that. She's like, yes, and I had no idea. Yes. She'd never done it.
I said yes, and then I picked up the phone and I called Chris Callis, who was a teacher in SVA, and he was my lighting teacher. And I said, SOS, I have an emergency. I need to devise a lighting setup. And I even offered to pay him. He refused. He's fantastic, as Charles knows. And we just came to the studio here and we practiced the lighting setup. and this was the kind of lighting we came up with. And that's how I started learning studio lighting. That was like the first portrait shoot. And so we came up with this.
Here's the other thing. A big part of like what we as photo editors do, and I do day in and day out, in some ways the job is two things. One, the art of it all, the inspiration, what you want to do creatively. And the other part is problem solving. Literally, it's 24/7 problem solving. Like, I can't tell you day after day the stuff that comes up. And I love, right from the beginning, I just knew it. Like, I would say it to the other photo editors, Dina Litovsky, she's a great problem solver. Like, she'll figure it out. So she didn't mention she had never done lighting in a studio, but she figured it out. You're going to see one or two other things coming, well, more than one or two. Like, you'll see stuff coming up where she'd never done it, but I had total confidence. She'll figure it out. She just does. Like, it's a confidence, you know? And then, what's that?
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I mean,
Fake
you don't
it till you make it, yeah.
I can't tell to the editor who wants to hire me. By the way, I've never done this before.
Yeah,
That's a sure way to not get hired. So I just lied. So of course I've done this before, and then I go and I study lighting.
And you put the work in. Like, that's the other thing. You have to work hard and work really hard, and then you quickly figured out what you were going to do with it. You know?
And then I learned, and now I can do studio lighting, but that's all thanks to Chris Callis and that shoot. And I think that was the first time I was hired for a portrait because I haven't done it before, so people assumed I don't do it, which I don't.
And now you do.
So then the next sports.
Yeah, tell us about this. So then the next one was sports again. And then it's funny because she's not a sports photographer. You're not a sports photographer, but it just seemed like there was something again that you would do with motion and just the constant dynamism of your images. Things are not still usually in your pictures. And I don't know, just that, again, what I think of as this kind of robust strength to them that just seemed to line up naturally with sports. So talk about this one, because it was also, again, problem solving. You're in a gym, it's the lighting, right?
Well, so my inspiration for this one, this was Lindsay Vonn. She's an Olympic skier. I went to her house, photographed her working out. It was supposed to be very intense, just to work out. Again, I've never photographed sports, and when the gym was beige, everything was beige, and the photos in color, and I'm a color photographer. The last time I did black and white was in SVA, and that was the last time I did black and white because Charles used to love it, called art sauce, and it's just, I only see in color, I don't see in black and white. But everything here was so beige, the intensity wasn't coming through, and I actually found a good use for art sauce, and it actually became not art sauce. It became the main ingredient. Like, these photos just did not work in color, and it was one of the only times that I actually managed to translate my color to black and white.
And it was the answer to the problem that you were faced with that, but even it took the thing that black and white does do really well, and you see it in this picture in particular, is it emphasizes emotion, so that the intensity in her eyes, you're drawn to that. You're not seeing the color of the ball, you're not seeing the color of her tank top or whatever. And that's an advantage black and white does often have, I think. Like, if you remove color that doesn't have an impact on the emotional tenor of what's happening, it can be helpful. So anyway, it's dramatic, the lighting, all of it, all the formal decisions are spot on, but it also did underscore, I think, a little bit of the intensity of the athletes. And that's what we wanted, women athletes, powerhouses, the best at their sport.
Yeah, and so for this one, I looked at Rodchenko. I guess everybody's familiar, social Russian constructivism, and he did black and white, and like very exaggerated angles. So I mean, all of these were kind of new for me, this type of shooting, to get this close. So I looked at a lot of his stuff before, and he photographed also like sports events and parades, and so I took kind of his angles, like really extreme, and his black and white contrast. So that was kind of what I was looking for this shoot. Yep.
I also think a lot about the fact you were consciously thinking of it for this shoot, but again, even if you weren't, if you spent years looking at Rodchenko, it's feeding your mind. Like, the muscle you've developed, it's already incorporated that way of seeing. It just lends to the sophistication, I think, sometimes of the image making, which will always be yours. It will always be true to who you are. It just will, There's no danger. I don't think people should worry about being too influenced, more about filling the well of just looking and looking all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was surprised about this one is that even though this wasn't my subject matter and it wasn't black and white, I've had people tell me that they still look at the page and they knew it was me.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I actually did not know how that was happening.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
I guess it's, the flash.
Yeah.
The flash solves all.
And the flash, but also maybe seeing a little bit of yourself in them. Like there's almost the way she's looking at you. You're looking for something in her. And I can sense there's a little bit two like-minded souls, and that mirroring effect that, I don't know, you had the flash and all that at your service, as it were, but you were also looking for something with them that somebody else might not be looking for. And I think it's that will, that kind of like, okay, I'm going to be the best at this sport. And you're able to get it. Like this picture is a great example of that. And this was one that you worked with Kristen Geisler,
Yes.
who's one of our picture editors. In each of these cases, I want to emphasize that there's a picture editor on the magazine who works. So like Kristen's now done a couple things with Dina, and that's just a nice rapport where we've got just an incredible team. And sometimes it's hard to remember who makes the assignment because we bat it around. We constantly are in creative dialogue. Who should we have do it? Sometimes it's me, often it's others. I usually sign off on it. This is beautiful too. Look at that. Just beautiful contrast and hard light.
I think this was almost good assignments or give me like a little epiphany, and I'm able to move forward a little bit as a photographer. And I think New York Times Magazine maybe has the most epiphanies, because you would send me to challenging situations. And if I haven't photographed something before, I have to figure it out. I can't just rely on instincts, and I can't trust. So remember even this shoot, for the first hour, I was making really bad photos. I just couldn't do it. And I learned after an hour of shooting, no matter what happens, I stop. I shut my brain off, I stop, and I regroup. And I regroup by pulling up Rodchenko on my phone and looking at his photos and like asking him, please help me, please help me. And I went back and I made those photos, and I just remember it started clicking. Like right away I got in the middle of the ropes, and I knew, okay, this is how it's gonna go. And so by the time I got to this photo, I was already good. Like I knew I got this. But it took me like the first hour I cannot do this.
Wow.
And it happens almost on every shoot. There's always first hour of desperation, and then I figure it out. It's never smooth sailing. And on this one, I figured out that I can use natural light and flash together, and it looks cool. And I haven't done this before. And so like I lit the ropes to the flash, and she was in sunlight, and I'm like, oh my God, that looks amazing. And I've been using it since then.
Yeah.
But it's the first time I figured that out. It took me like 7 years of using flash.
Wow.
Just wonderful.
Right, this one.
Yeah.
This is something that no editor or director of magazine ever knows what's going on behind the scenes. So you're gonna find out. Oh, some
I
of
found out stuff as we prepared for this talk that I was like, what? I had no idea. I know.
So this is just a little blooper. This is the most unfortunate shoot of my career, basically. Again, something nobody knew until now. So the magazine sent me to photograph Elvis fans on his 40th anniversary, I think, paying respects to the grave. And right as I was heading on a plane, I got an eye infection, like bloodshot eyes, like really, really badly. Like I had to wear sunglasses through the airport, and it was hard to see. And I got to the shoot, so I ran to the clinic, and I needed antibiotics. And the doctor put eye dilating drops instead of antibiotics, and then the one they put for surgery. And so my pupils dilated, and I couldn't see. And so I went to and as I came back home with my assistant who drove me, I couldn't really see just shapes and colors. I tripped on my camera and broke the lens and the autofocus. And this was day 1 of 3-day shoot.
Oh.
And I'm just gonna show you, look, the photos there, this is like 3 photos from the shoot. I called my editor, who was, I think, Samantha Clark. So it's 2000, I don't remember who it was. But I called her and I said, I'm sorry, I'm blind. And I don't think she believed me. She's like, okay, we'll do the best job you can. I'm like, no, I'm serious, I'm blind. And so I went with my assistant, and I photographed at night with a broken lens, and she would just point something, 2 people there, and I would just shoot like this.
Oh my God. Oh.
And I did this for 3 days.
Oh.
About 20% of photos were in focus. in the end. And I sent them to the editor, and she was very relieved because she already knew that I was blind. And then the story got canceled.
And then it got canceled.
You got lucky. Oh man.
So that's that. So not every shoot is going to be your best.
No. Yeah, definitely stuff happens. Fate intervenes.
I mean, you
Right.
can't make that up, though.
You can't make that one up. I don't know what a double. First the eyes and then the camera. All right. Then this was the story on the warrior drones. So this was definitely an unusual one for you. This was a story that we did on the, when they first started heavily using drones in warfare, the U.S., which would often mean men or women, but probably usually men in the U.S. sometimes looking through a screen and making decisions to drop bombs from afar. So the story looked at the psychological impact on the soldiers. And Dean did a very nice job on photographing them. Again, you can see with a cinematic quality to the lighting and these tight, like training modules or whatever it was that they were in. You did a really nice job on that. Yeah.
That was a hard one. That was one of the hardest, and I included it because it was more like conceptual shoot. There was no subject. It wasn't there was a person to take a portrait of specifically. There wasn't a specific. There was a subject, but there weren't specific scenes. Go photograph this. There weren't situations.
There weren't
And I just
situations.
came. I had like I think 2 days or even 1 day, to photograph that anxiety. So I tried to use light here. So here light was and color was super important.
Yeah, and everybody keep in mind, photographing somebody in front of a screen honestly is one of the toughest things to make interesting. And to your credit, you did.
I tried.
You tried. Yeah,
I tried.
You did it. That's a wonderful picture of that.
I tried to use just shadows and like abstract shapes because it's supposed to hint at anxiety, and like some things. How do you photograph
Yep.
anxiety?
How do you photograph it?
I was breaking my mind to photograph the story. And it was a portrait of the veteran from the army.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a tough one.
And I think that's a very tender picture for you, knowing that that's what this called for,
Yeah,
right? I imagine that was a tough one to do.
I had to switch my usual style, which is much harsher flash, and I would say more critical.
Yeah.
And here I had to switch. So here the lighting, I used gels. This was the times when I started using gels for the first time. Like I wanted to soften my style.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I know what's required and I still try to keep it within kind of my realm
Yep.
of like my style. And so,
Yep.
it was kind of always like this balance.
Yep.
How do you respect the story and still kind of get a bit of yourself in it?
Yep.
And then sometimes you have to sacrifice if it's a story, like some stories you put yourself aside and kind of my style. And so I put aside my harsh flash, remember, and I did a very different portrait.
But it still looks very much like yours. I think it does. It just, wouldn't have been right for that to have it
Yeah.
kind of, the hard flash. Like it called for something else.
And then I fell in love with gels.
Oh my God. Okay. we had, for our annual Voyages issue, one year we decided to do Voyages and sound. So the whole idea was it was places where sound was important to the voyage, the sound of it. And it was an interactive online with audio, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And one of them that we were doing was New York City, the sounds that the rats make to communicate with each other. They're very intelligent animals and they speak a language. And there's an expert in New York who's been spending years like recording it. And I can still remember us discussing who we should have do it. I was like, Dina Litovsky, she can do it, like to go photograph the rats, right? So we were laughing because first assignment was Hawaii, aloha, and now she's doing rats for us down on Bleecker Street. This picture came in and I literally burst out laughing. I thought I was going to die. He's so cute. I'm like, how in the world did she get that? Like I remember it. So Jessica Dimpson, the deputy director of photography, was working with Dean and director, and we're like, how did she get this? So you got to tell them how you did this.
Oh, boy.
This is not an easy assignment, right? You see them all the time in New York, but if you're going to photograph them, forget it.
Well, this is my second assignment for Voyages. So the first was Hawaii, and I loved it. I'm like, I want to do another Voyages. So I get an email the next year. We'll do another Voyages in New York. In the email, there was no mention of rats. Just, do you want to do Voyages? And I'm like, yes. I'm going to France.
You're going
And then they're like, New York. I'm like, okay, New York, I can do New York. What am I doing? You're doing rats.
doing rats.
And I was like, okay, that's karma. I had too much fun in Hawaii.
Too much fun.
And then I mean, I don't know if I said no or I was just like, I don't know how to do this, but I told you, I had to tell you, I don't photograph rats. You can't hire Chris Callis and ask him to teach me how to photograph rats. So I had to say, I can't do this. I've never photographed animals. I have no idea how to photograph animals. And you asked me to photograph them with flash. And rats do not like being flashed.
Which again is to try to give it a different look, right? So what do? New York Times Magazine, don't want it to look like Geographic, just to do something different. So let's flash them. How do you do it? Dina will solve that problem.
So the first day, very confident, I took my camera and my flash and I went to Tompkins Square Park, not far from where I live, to chase rats with flash. You can imagine how that went. First, I'm not afraid of rats, so that was always like, if it was cockroaches, I would say no. But rats I'm okay with. I think they're cute. So that was not a problem. The problem was I tried to chase them with flash. That did not work at all. They're very smart, they're very fast, they don't like being flashed. After about 2 hours of this, I went home. And then I think I asked for help. I'm like, I need more help. Like, I can't do this. And I think the New York Times Magazine, there was like a rat scientist that helped to tell me how they move, where I can
The
find
patterns,
them.
yeah.
And then it happened that my barista, at my coffee place, was a conservation photographer, and he photographed coyotes, and he knew how to do animal traps. And so I asked him if he could be my assistant. And his name is Ivan, and he helped me set up the shoot. And so he explained to me, I cannot just go with my camera and my flash and chase rats, that I have to put it on a tripod, I have to have a trigger remote, like I had to get the equipment, and I have to wait. And so me and him, we knew, so the rat scientist, he helped us find which are the most rat-infested parks. If you don't like rats, don't go to West Village parks. There were a lot of couples who had no idea that there were like rat parties around them. And so this is a little park by Washington Square Park. It's really charming. A lot of rats. Like I can actually hear, like they laugh and it's really cute. And so I set up the camera. See, there's a camera and then there is a flash. And so this is the crate that this rat came out of. And what I learned, I mean, rats are extremely intelligent. You have to first bathe them. You have to give them some kind of like the scientific, put some food on the crates.
They like peanut butter, right?
Yeah. And then you have to wait. And once you flash the rat once, it's not going to come out for a very, very long time. And so I spent about, I think, 5 days, about 3 to 4 hours each day, waiting for the rats to make 12 pictures.
But that's a great photo, right? Like as rat photos go. I
mean,
loved it. I just loved it.
I also watched
It also has
Ratatouille
your
before.
humor. It has your humor in it. Wait, what?
I watched Ratatouille before. That was my inspiration.
Watch Ratatouille.
Not kidding.
Smart move. Oh my God.
But my chief amusement was looking at the couples.
I see that. I actually live on Thompson Street, and I just like when I see people sitting on the benches and in Washington Square Park at night, there's just tons of rats. I'm always so surprised. Like some people, I guess, don't care.
I don't think they knew.
No, maybe they didn't know, but that's also what surprises me because you can hear them. And honestly, since the sheds, please, there's a lot more. Like you could probably have gotten so many more. Anyway, this is pre-sheds.
I love actually photographing it so much. I'm like, I want to do more rats.
You want to do more rats? Oh my God.
I like the challenge of it. The fact that I got that final photo was so satisfying. That even though I kind of hated some of the process, like failing, in the end it was very rewarding to get a picture of a rat.
It was a great photo. There's a piece in the Times I saw today, but I haven't had a chance to read it. I can't wait to read it. Did anybody see the one about rats taking selfies? So I just read the headlines. It looks amazing. Apparently they're so smart. And once they take selfies, they continue to take more. That somebody set it up. It sounds like you read it.
Yeah, they like were obsessed with like wanting to take selfies. Like it was something that they were really
They
invested in.
trained them to do it. I can't wait to read it, just to see. Oy.
All right, from
This
rats
was a
to
beauty.
Hawaii.
Rats to
Back
the
to Hawaii.
back to Hawaii, but the world's top elite women surfers, very specialized, right? Like there's certain fields of photography that it actually really, really helps to know it, like surfing photography. And again, talk about just wanted it not, just to give it that different look, like a high impact look, and just thought Dina would be so good at this. And again, you just figured out, despite never having done surfing. How did you do it this time?
Well, first I said no.
Oh,
Actually,
that's-
remember I came to
yes,
the office and I
yes.
said I can't do this.
And
I'm-
then
And you convinced me like, no, you're gonna do this.
you're gonna do this.
Yeah, I'm like, how am I gonna do this? I mean, I swim, but I don't swim, you know, I cannot get in the water with the camera. And you said something, okay, we'll get you a boat.
We'll get you a boat. So listen, we'll get you a boat.
Because I explained that I can't do this. Like, I never even used a telephoto lens. Wait, I think I have a picture. That's me with my telephoto lens. It was also my birthday. So first I flew to Hawaii, then I flew to San Francisco. And I had to get this camera I've never used, photograph a sport I've never seen, on a tiny boat. I was going like this, and I was seasick because I've never done this before. And I remember lying on the bottom of the boat on my birthday and just hating life and everything. And I'm like, I'm going, that's it. I'm done as a photographer. I'm going to quit.
Well, probably the combination of the telephoto lens and the rocking of the boat.
Yeah, you have to
you're gonna
look-
get sick to your stomach. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
hard.
And the people who, I mean, the women and everybody around me, they knew that I wasn't a surf photographer, and they were very dubious about what I was doing there. And I think they were enjoying that I was seasick. They were like, okay, she's not coming back. But I came back, and then I showed them the pictures, and I got a little respect. They're like, oh, all right, fine, let's do this again. And I went out a few days, and I was photographing these shots. And initially they were in color.
Yep.
And I remember showing them to you in color, and I was like, I'm not sure about the color. It looks very pretty. It's too beautiful. It doesn't look intense. Like, I wanted the waves to look like a big, like, rock, like menacing stone. And I think we both made the decision this is going to be better in black and white. And so it became my second black and white project.
Yep. And it just had a great graphic power going to the black and white. Like it just, and then, we have it's beautiful. We have the best design team anywhere. Gail Bickler is the creative director. And she oversaw this, and Matt Willey designed it. And I just loved how that type like that just increased the height of the wave. But again, Dina had framed it in a way that's a little bit unusual, but she knew to keep that horizon line up on the top. If your horizon line's on the top part of the frame or the bottom, you got a good picture. If it's in the middle, not so good. But
I think in the end, even though I hated for the first day, it's one of my favorite shoots just because I was able to do it. And it just feels,
it was great.
I feel like because I'm not a surf photographer, I didn't see images in front of, like, I had no reference point in that way. Not surfing one. And so actually when I afterwards look at surfing photos, I realized they look very different. And I think in the end, kind of that's what the magazine wanted, different surfing photos. And then I had to do also portraits.
And the portraits are beautiful, just beautiful.
And honestly, that cover, anytime for some reason, if we have to pull together like our favorite covers for whatever, for the magazine, that one's always in the batch, the tight edit of our favorite covers of 10 years or whatever. I love it so much.
When I came back, I was like, I can be a surf photographer.
I can
That was fun. I mean, being in a boat on those waves and being able to come up with something, because I did not think I'm going to do it. And in the end, I had like maybe 20 photos that were in focus.
Amazing. It's literally.
You must have nerves of steel, like, to be doing that and not.
I'm
at
persistent.
You're persistent. Well, that's great. That's part of it, right?
But it's also fun. It's just, I mean, it is a lot of fun to actually see something come to life that you didn't think is possible. Like I can imagine if I went to anybody else and I said, I cannot do this assignment, they would be like, okay, we'll find somebody who can. And you insisted. And I think your faith in my abilities was very, like, inspiring. I'm like, okay, if Kathy said I can do it, I can do it.
I can do it. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes it takes a leap of faith. I think about that one a lot too. Just, I don't know, you gotta have faith. Yeah.
No, it's true.
Explain
Like,
it. It's almost like a cosmic thing, but gotta have faith. And somebody who can problem solve. You can make it happen. Like, you were gonna figure out how to do it, and then we were gonna get different kind of surfing pictures.
So now it's completely different.
Now completely different. So this
Yeah.
is not as dramatic, right? In some ways, the surfing is as dramatic and visually spectacular as any subject you could get. This was voting by mail. Remember when that was the big story at the end of 2020? the voting by mail might tip the election. And Jake Silverstein, the editor-in-chief, had the idea, let's do a photo issue on voting by mail. That is not an easy subject to translate into photography.
No,
But
it's not.
It's not. So tell us how you went at that one, where again, the banality of it, you're in these fluorescent lit places
Yeah.
where people are counting ballots.
Well, so besides the really fun shoots like rats and surfing, I also get hired a lot for really, I don't want to say ugly places, but places with fluorescent lighting. So I do a lot of offices, science stores. Basically, I'm kind of, magazines hire me to fix something. This is a bad story. You can't get any visuals. Go do something. Bring us something back. And so I find myself in situations a lot where I have to go into an office and make exciting imagery, and so my influence is always David Lynch. So at that point, I always think, what would David Lynch do?
What would David Lynch do?
Because he would take the most banal kind of spaces, and and he just turns them into these worlds, and they're beautiful. They're beautifully lit and they're colorful, and so that was really my inspiration. David Lynch, everything he does, Twin Peaks: The Return, and with that kind of making it a little darker, a little maybe ominous, showing the other side. I used a lot of gels. That's really when the gels came out.
Excellent.
Because these places do not look like this.
Yeah.
There are no oranges, there are no blues. They're white fluorescent office spaces, and people are just counting ballots. It's as tedious as it looks, as tedious as it sounds. And so I had an assistant. I had a whole gel system. I think that's the first shoot that I really kind of went crazy with them. Like, I did not hold myself back. I was.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could see, like, so there's like a lot of blues, a lot of yellows. That was kind of my main color scheme: orange, blue, and yellow. So I devised the color scheme. And I went to 3 states. It was Arizona, Florida,
Yep. And I was going to say,
and Pennsylvania.
I remembered you did quite a few, and you worked with Kristen Geisler on that also. That
Yeah.
You can't underestimate the importance of laying the groundwork for the photographers, and I think that our team does a great job of that, just really working the access and trying to anticipate everything that we can, just to get you the best possible start off, like access and what you're going to do and where you're going to go. And I just remember we did several assignments in that issue with other photographers. It wasn't easy, weirdly enough. Getting the access we needed, it was tricky.
Yeah.
She worked on it closely, and Jessica Dimson also. And I just remember it was heroic, like what they were able to get in getting you guys into the right place, the right time, and working with you on the look of it and the editing. It was a big, intense project, actually.
And it was a really important story at the time.
Yeah.
Because people were
Oh,
not, as
yes.
it was going on about what's going on with the election, I was in the places where the voting was happening, and
Yeah.
I saw it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting kind of dissonance to see it on TV. Is the election real? And when I was in the counting space, looking at people counting the ballots, one
Yeah.
Republican, one Democrat on each side, and everybody getting along. So, it was. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed getting a glimpse of that
Yeah.
reality that I would never otherwise get. So that was also for me a very educational experience, and I really actually did enjoy photographing it because I knew kind of the task to take these spaces and transform them into something.
Into something. Yeah.
And my idea was to kind of create a very uniform world with that.
And it was nice. I recall in the issue, and I hope somebody remembers some of it, we had Philip Montgomery do some, and he worked in black and white. But he takes a similar approach to you in the sense of not just accepting the space he's given, but figuring out how to light it in a way that heightens it and gives it a little bit more drama or cinema, which is necessary because then it emphasizes the importance of what was happening. These women look heroic as they're counting these votes. This was democracy in action. And I just loved how the two of you, your signatures went well and were different, and it was a nice just way to change it up in the issue.
Yeah, I think in these places, light is the most important.
Yeah,
It's all about the light.
it's all about the light.
So that's just a little segue. You asked me to shoot a lot of sports. I don't shoot sports. I don't even like sports. This is my first basketball game. I've never seen basketball. I had to ask who were all the players. And so you just said, go photograph basketball. So I got a telephoto lens, another one. And I went to photograph basketball. And that was fun.
Yeah, and this was good, but when we were talking about it, it's, NBA basketball, major player like Kevin Durant, that is a different set of challenges because you don't get the freedom of movement. So it's not like Dina could totally do her thing. You have to shoot from wherever it is or the, authorized spots for the sports photographers who cover a lot of games. And that one is particularly specialized because the speed that they move at, it actually really helps to know, to be able to anticipate where it's going to go, who they're going to pass the ball to. And if you don't, there is a lot to be said for not cross-assigning with some sports, particularly the major league stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, but still, you made it's a lovely picture, but it doesn't have quite the same signature because you didn't have the freedom. But we're going to look now at something on girls field hockey, high school team, and it's spectacular. And why? Because this was a case where you're matched with something where you could do your thing and just have probably pretty much full-on access, right?
And I could use flash. Like, so basketball, I couldn't use flash.
Yep.
So that's how, even though it was my composition, without the flash in that situation, there's not much I could do. And so by contrast, obviously here, it's also sports, but here, I could get close and I could use flash.
Yeah.
And that was right away a different.
And then look, spectacular sports photo. Like literally, you knew to get down there, you got the ball, the goalie, the whole thing, incredible.
I looked at pictures of field hockey before I went to understand what the sport is because I've never seen it. So I wanted to see what are the main moments that other photographers are getting because I would not even know what to look for.
So at least you knew.
Kind of,
It's that goal. But still, it's hard to get that. These were lovely, the portraits of the girls. Yeah. Tell them about your inspiration. Can anybody guess who was the inspiration, who was whispering in her ear on this one?
It's a photographer. Huh?
What?
Yes.
Yes.
Little obvious on this one.
I don't think it's obvious, but yes, the framing maybe. But the lighting is different, totally. But
Yeah.
it was Dykstra.
Yeah, I looked at her photos of the beach because I had to photograph these teenage girls. And again, that's usually not my subject matter in general. And I knew that, again, I couldn't use my usual flash in the same way. Because usually I throw everything into dark. It's very dramatic. It can be, I thought it's going to be garish for the girls, so I changed my lighting system. I used an umbrella, which I never usually do, and a reflector, so I softened the lighting. And I guess I wanted the girls to be both kind of vulnerable, but also powerful. Yeah. And so I found the shed in the middle of that field, and we did those portraits. I think that was my favorite.
Beautiful.
And so the feature came out with kind of both portraits and documentary, which I feel like a lot of stuff we do is combining both.
Yep. Yeah, very nice.
The layouts on this were really nice, right? Yeah, I thought so too. And the picture editor on this was David Carthus
Yeah.
that you were working with. Yeah, this one came together beautifully.
And I think it's going to be such a big story, honestly. When I saw it, it was like maybe 8 pages. It was a big story, this one.
Because that was the case because of the photos, I'm sure.
I was very happy with it.
It was bumped up. If the shoot is really good, we usually have a pretty good shot at bumping up the number of pages it'll get. So if we've got the goods, the editor will get extra pages. Pretty much most of the time, I mean, again, every so often maybe there's a book that for some reason we don't have that much leeway with the page count, but
it's also, in the beginning when I was assigned, it doesn't seem like a big story. And I think that's one thing that I've learned. There are no small stories.
yeah.
Every story is the biggest story
Yes.
I'm ever going to do.
Yep.
And so when I approached that story, again, it's not celebrities, it's maybe not big wave surfing, and it ended up being one of my favorite stories and one of the biggest, in the magazine.
Yeah.
And I think that also took me several years to learn, but every story is the biggest, most important story you're ever going to do.
I love that.
This is more recent work. This is just this year. It's couples therapy.
Couples therapy.
Or not.
Yep.
That was just a story we did on couples therapy that Sue Dominus wrote, and Jessica Dimson was the picture editor working with you.
Yeah.
And again, that was a little bit more of a quieter, humanistic, intimate story for you. But
Yeah, it's another story where I had one approach when I came in. I wanted to do my visual flash, a lot of drama, kind of maybe more like this one, like throwing into dark. And when I came into to this couple, there was some tension. Like I could feel some couple tension. They were a little maybe shy. There was somebody, a photographer and an assistant, and I realized I cannot photograph them in the same way, and I had to completely just rethink my whole setup. And then I just really just softened the lighting. And again, I took out my umbrella, which I always carry, but I never really use. It's just in case umbrella. So this was just in case umbrella, which just softens, it softens the light. And I didn't direct them at all. I just let them sit anywhere they want. And I think that was the photo. And with this couple, I traveled to, where was it? North Carolina, I think.
I don't remember.
I think it was North Carolina. And so it was supposed to be a picture of just a couple, no kid. And the boy, he really wanted to be in the photo, and he kept screaming and crying for an hour, and he kept ruining all of my shots. And the couple did not know what to do. And in the end, I realized that the photo is of their interaction with the child. And I'm like, okay, you can be in the shot, and he lay on the floor. And I was really happy that this was the final chosen photo, because it's like 20 photos without a kid and one photo with a kid, and that was the one that was chosen.
And that's the best one. Like, that's a classic case. And thank goodness, it was beautiful. It's interesting, over the years I've noticed, when you're photographing families, it's really important to just observe how they position themselves. Like,
Yeah.
It's just interesting always, who stands next to who, and here, I don't know, the body language between the couple and then the kid being the commanding presence. It's interesting, and you instinctively knew that. Like, just let them take their place, and then he was doing his thing anyway, and you managed to capture like something that just feels like it's got a lot of undercurrent of, I think, truth and what was going on in their interaction, and their personality, the kid especially.
And it's always like, for me, it was a picture because I was there, but it's always interesting when I send a photo and photo edit and you're not in the room, will we see the same thing?
Will we see? Yeah.
And I never know until you choose the photo. And then I realized we saw, because I didn't know I like this photo, but I would not fight for it. Is this the better photo than of the couple? So when you chose that one, I knew that this was the right photo. And I think that's a collaboration. I always feel like I learned something from the edit.
Yep. I like the way it generally works with us is the photo editor whose work, so we figure out how to shoot it, and then sometimes it's the photo editor, but I again, sign off and everything, and often it's me saying I want so-and-so, so it's like a mix, and we have sometimes a group brainstorm. And then when the edit comes in, what tends to work the best is when the photographer sends their edit plus some additionals. And usually, and I always say to the photo editors, let's start with the photographer's edit. Usually it's spot on. Photographers tend to know their best pictures, the people that work with us. We get the extra because sometimes, just sometimes, something might be missed, or maybe we actually, it sounds like so boring. We have such a struggle that the world unfolds horizontally pretty much, especially documentary work, and the phone is this tall vertical. So, okay, we're constantly trying to figure out how to maximize it. We got about 70% of our readers read us on the phone. So anyways, I cannot tell you, if you can figure out how to make really vertical, high-impact pictures of documentary subjects, that's so necessary. But anyway, the edit the photographer makes is usually what we're working off of, and then we're just going even tighter and picking, let's say if you did an edit of 15 or 20 or whatever, then we are picking the 2 or 3 that we publish, and then looking at the outtakes, or they're not outtakes at that point, just in case it really is something that somehow formats better, but equally good picture, or but that doesn't usually happen. I'd say the initial, the best pictures, like we see them. You see
It
them.
takes years though to develop.
What's that?
It takes years to develop.
To develop, but yeah. We're good, and we pride ourselves that we're fast. Like, we have to move, we have to edit. We can do it with speed, which we do, is important. We have somebody right now who's taking a long time with the edit. We're like, what is going on? Just cut to the chase. We can get it edited, but photographers do a good edit. All right, this story, okay. Last fall, we were doing a special issue on space, and the issue was really shaping up to be not very photographic. So it was really going to be heavy on graphics, online sort of graphics where, there was a whole thing about space junk, all that stuff, the thousands of objects, whether it's discarded satellites, all that, there's tons of stuff there. I'm sure you've been seeing the coverage, rotating around in space and orbiting. And I was getting more and more worried because I just felt like, God, I get some kind of photo essay in it. And there was going to be like Hubble telescope, space photos, etc. And then I had heard for a while about this person, Guy Pignolet, who you see here, who happens to be the father-in-law of my sister. So I didn't really know him. He lives on Reunion Island. And he was in the French space program. Anyway, to cut to the chase, I'd always heard that he carries a paper when he dies. He very much wants his ashes to be sent into space. So then I start Googling and doing research, and there's a major company. There's more than one, but the biggie is this company, Celestis. And you can arrange so that when you go, if you'd like, you can have like a small capsule. The ashes are a very small payload on rockets that are going up with a lot of other stuff, probably satellites, technology, whatever. And now you can send a little bit of DNA. And there were 4 different packages. You could do low orbit. You could do something that goes up for 10 minutes and it comes back. You could do one that goes way out. That one costs the most. It's really kind of fascinating. So the more I looked at it, I pitched it to the editors, to Jake Soderson, the editors of the magazine. It didn't get green-lighted right away, and then it did. And I was very excited because my feeling was this could bring humanity into the issue. This would give us a way to photograph people. And then thinking about wanting it to have a modern look with a little bit of celestial light, that's where Dina came in. So we called, I think I probably called you on that one, right?
Well,
Anyway.
I met you, we met at lunch, and then I said I have to go to Japan in 2 weeks.
Yep. So then she said she was going to Japan on this prearranged trip, and we had to, of course, shoot this in a very tight window, and the idea was to photograph him on Reunion Island, which is off the coast of Madagascar, and then I had picture editor working on it, Amy Kellner. She then worked with the people at Celestis to do a broadcasting. So they would give us bios of people who had signed up for the day they passed, have their stuff go, and then we could look at them. We wanted a diverse group with different stories to tell. And a terrific writer, John Wallen, was assigned. And he writes with both empathy and pathos and humor. Like he's funny, and yet there's pathos. Like I just thought he would be great, and Jake had suggested him also. But then we had a problem. They were all over the place, like in different states and Madagascar. It began to look really impractical, both for Dina to get on a plane and not to mention even the budget, right? And then I was so happy. Dina called and said, how about if I do it remotely? And I don't think I ever told you. I had actually thought, I wonder if I should ask her to do it remotely. And I was afraid to do that, I'll be honest. And I was so like, yes. And I think that was when Amy said to me, maybe you were asking to do it remote. I'm like, you bet. And that's our 5th shoot we've done remotely of a major photo shoot. And look at the problem, just beautiful pictures. You have to tell them, how did you figure this out? How did you do it?
Well, it's funny that because eventually I couldn't do the project because I was going to Japan and there was like the 8 people all over, and there was no way I could, even if I flew, there was no way to do it. And I remember being afraid to propose remote. I'm like, no, they're gonna think this is stupid. Which is I didn't know.
Afraid to bring it up, thinking you might be a what?
And because I did, because you
know.
want them to be very beautiful, and remote shoots obviously there are a lot of limitations. And so I needed 2 assistants. I needed to do a cinematic lighting system. I wanted to do gels. I wanted to do gobos. So I wanted to go all out for this. And so remotely, all of these were shot on smartphone. So this is kind of the setup. There is an app which the subject downloads on their phone, or rather the assistant that I had in each space. And so the app connects to my computer, to this laptop, and I take over the person's camera. And so I take the picture, so you can see the interface. Here you can see autofocus. I can change the lens of the phone, and this is the shutter button. You can see this. Yeah. A shutter app. It's remote photo shoots. There are only 2 apps that do it. There's one Ukrainian and one Russian. Somehow, it's true. Somehow, I think this is the Russian one. After the pandemic, nobody else is doing it. There's only just these two apps. There's Clos, CLOS, and then there's Shutter app, and that's it. The other way to do it is it's really hard. It's possible, but it's much harder. So with this app, you just connect to the person's phone. The assistant holds the phone, and I take pictures. I direct them, and I have to, basically, I become a director. It's really interesting when you're a photographer, and then you just put on a clothes and you go to your bedroom and you do a shoot in Madagascar without a camera. And so this is the setup from the view of my assistant. I ask them to take pictures. So that's me on a computer. I connect to them on Zoom. And then I also, so I see them I see the scene on the Zoom, so I can see everything and set up the lighting. So like everything that happens, I'm directing. I'm directing the light, the subject, the assistant, tell them how to hold the camera. It takes about 3 hours. Afterwards, I'm brain dead because I've just directed and talked for 3 hours.
And a time zone difference in some
And
cases.
time zone difference.
Yeah.
And so, for example, you could, so, hold on. So this
So
was,
we had to obviously hire a range of a lighting assistant in each place.
Yeah, and this
that's
was
like a crucial part of it. Yeah.
yeah, this was a cinematic, so I can't, obviously I'm using a smartphone, so I can't use strobes. So everything had to be all continuous lighting. And I wanted to use theatrical lighting, so we hired basically assistants who work with video, who were just able to set a theatrical cinematic setup. And we would devise, I wanted each person to have their own color. So you could see this one got red, blue.
And some of them, some of the people that we featured had a role in the space program. So like the first one who was the inspiration for this had worked in the French space program for many years, although he'd never had the opportunity to go to space. And then one or two of the others had also, but then others are just regular citizens, people who just like the idea of having this cosmic, having their remains up there for some of it.
So yeah, that's the setup for the app and the lighting. You can see like an LED continuous lighting. And that's he's a retired physics professor. That's his wife holding the iPad from which I'm photographing. And usually it was a tool. It was a pretty complicated system kind of setup, but I mean, it worked beautifully. And so this was my inspiration, because when I first got this story, I thought it's a very serious story. And then I went to Celestis and it said something like, make your dreams of going to space a reality. And it's just really Monty Pythonish. It's really funny, I thought. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be a humorous story. It's not going to be serious. And so I looked up posters for old cult sci-fi movies, like Metropolis and just movies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, a little like kitschy, colorful aesthetic. And so I wanted to bring that in with the colors.
Tell them about him. All his
He's
stuff.
he was awesome. He's a Star Trek enthusiast and collector of all things space. So he just had a crazy house.
He's got that case with the full little astronaut in it.
Yeah.
A certain number of them, even famous former Star Trek actors have done this. Yeah, there's definitely a Star Trek connection.
And he showed me the tie, and he was like, "Do you want me to the tie?" I'm like, "Yes." Remove before flight. And I mean,
And
all
the
the
shirt.
all the people who such amazing characters.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm photographing them through an iPhone screen. And I just fell in love with all of them.
Yeah.
And so I wanted the photos to kind of reflect that. They were also quirky and charming, every one of them.
And that's when I pitched it, that's what I was hoping. I was thinking, I'll bet there'll be quirky, interesting people. And they were, like in the different, short text blocks that went with the pictures. They were just terrific, all interesting. And again, from the last one, some of them were sort of fun and charming. And then the one that we published last, his wife had recently died, I think after a battle with cancer, right? And he was still sort of in mourning and heartbroken, and that's right. It was like a whole other thing. And then his quote said something like, they're not in the space program. They had never talked about any of this. And as she got near the end, she said something to him like, I want my ashes to go up in space. Can you figure it out? And he said, whatever her name was, yeah, I'll look into it, or something. It was so touching.
That's
I
her on a
literally-
pillow.
Amy Kellner, the photo editor working on it, she and I both just started to tear up. So that was both charming and then that poignance, But then Dina and I were talking about this the other day. The letters, the comments were really a huge portion of them were not very nice. Like, I didn't anticipate it. Normally you publish, a lot of the readers said it's egotistical to do that. Why would you do that? I'm still baffled. I thought people would love it. And that, we live in a time when a lot of people don't have the religious, cultural tradition to fall back on. They don't know quite what to do when that day comes with their loved one. And I thought this could actually be a beautiful thing because most readers don't know about it, for people to discover that it might help them come up with new ways of memorializing their loved one. And because the people that do it seem to very, you fly down if you want to see the rocket take off. And then they have like a get-together memorial dinner for the different families that have gone to, it's either Cape Canaveral or I think even California and Texas also sometimes, depends where the rocket's taking off. And a lot of the readers wrote in, egotistical, why would people do it? There's enough junk in space, why do that? And then a number of them wrote things like, you don't need it in space, you're in space, Earth is in space, like stuff like that. Anyway, that's neither here
My
nor
next
there.
newsletter is about that.
Wait, what?
When I'm writing a newsletter about why.
You're
Yes,
writing?
Yes.
Anyway, so that was the one thing that was a surprise in it, because they were just such lovely portraits, and that I thought that the interviews that John Wallen did were great. So you never know. You never know.
That has nothing to do with the story. They didn't read the story, because if they read the story, they would know nobody's throwing ashes into space.
Yeah, that's what we, and that we purposely ran the picture with the hands holding the little capsule so people could see, because the first thing you think is, I don't understand, how do they do it? It's just a small amount, Anyway, but that was very recent. That was a couple months ago.
So that's
we're just
photographing,
about
yeah.
at the
That was the
end.
biggest remote photography project I've done, all with a smartphone. And I think we should just jump to cut questions.
Yes,
to
jump
this
ahead
one, yeah.
And
This
that's
is the only one we haven't done. I haven't done specifically for New York Times Magazine, but we wanted to include this. And then we'll do questions.
remarkable.
Yeah,
If anybody has any questions. Yeah. And we haven't talked about your Substack. It's so good. So if you don't subscribe, it's so worth it. Please, I'm not. It's just terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Really remarkable. I just like to say a couple of things.
Do we have a mic? You have, yep, the mic, there's a mic. So if you're asking questions, there's a mic.
There were some here. Sorry, I cut it off.
We have a number of people in the program now starting to think about doing some documentary work on various timely subjects, and they always say, well, I can't get access, or I can't, I don't know where to begin, and I got to do that. And I think some of the things that are emphasized is it takes practice, that you said, and in some cases you said it took you 6 years to figure out certain things, and so you got to begin. And one of the things I just want to emphasize, particularly to the students, but I guess we're all students. When Dina was a student here, she went through many different iterations of possibilities that the lens and screen arts could do, from constructed, conceptual things, whatever. And at one day, in the midst, I think, of her thesis year, she said, I'm going to do it my way. And, she went out and did the parties, which became her thesis. And, she stopped listening, in a sense, or absorbed everything that she knew and said, okay, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do. And obviously, this is the result. Oh,